Friends, today I'm going to talk to you about a special type of sampling technique, which is called multi-stage sampling. Now, this technique is commonly used in large-scale surveys, but it can also be used in smaller surveys, say surveys at the state level or district level, or even in your smaller projects like PhD thesis. For the purpose of clarity, I have organized my presentation into a number of slides, which I'm going to share with you. So let me share my slides. This is the title, uh, Multi-Stage Sampling, 10 Reporting Items. In this presentation, I am going to tell you that it is not enough to say that you have used multi-stage sampling. You have to say something more. And what are all the things that you have to document? That is the subject matter of this presentation. First of all, what is multi-stage sampling? Multi-stage sampling is also called multi-stage cluster sampling because it's an extension or form of cluster sampling. Sampling is, however, done in stages, unlike cluster sampling. We do sampling in stages. Selecting smaller units at each stage within the units selected at the preceding stage. And as I said, that it is particularly suited to large-scale socioeconomic surveys. I will give you some examples, but it can also be used in smaller surveys. What are the roots of multi-stage sampling? In 1802, a French mathematician Laplace used the ratio method to project the population of France on the basis of ratios of births in communes to the entire nation. And in 1662, John Grant calculated population of England using a similar method. It was basically in 1895 that a Norwegian statistician, A.N. Kerr, developed the multi-stage sampling for socioeconomic surveys by selecting miniatures of populations such as districts and towns and then subunits, the first stage aggregate units. He called it a representative method. You know that there are so many techniques of sampling, but if you want to select one, then the decision criterion would be which technique would be more representative of the whole population. It's not just a part. Sample is not just a part of the population. It is a representative part of the population. Now, what is method? Multi-stage sampling starts with the first stage units, often called primary sampling units. The primary sampling units are then divided into two or more subunits. The second stage units are selected from these subunits. The subunits may also be divided further into third stage sampling units. And the process continues till we reach the final stage sample units called FSU. Now, for example, your sampling may be like this, that you choose a district. Now, within the district, you choose certain blocks. In those blocks, you choose PSCs. In PSCs, you choose some subcenters. And then select some respondents, say women in reproductive groups, for the study of antenatal care or general reproductive health, postnatal care, antenatal, general, postnatal from different subcenters. So like in this case, in PSC 1, subcenter 1 is selected. In PSC 2, subcenter 2 is selected. Examples in which uh, important surveys in which multi-stage sampling has been used. National Sample Survey India, 1969. Labor Force Survey Australia, 1997. Income Distribution Survey Finland, 2004. Various rounds of National Family Health Survey in India. Now, sixth round is going on. In all the rounds, we have used multi-stage sampling. LASI. LASI means longitudinal aging study in India. That has also used multi-stage sampling. Election studies often use multi-stage sampling, and I will show you how. To give you examples from these NFHS and some other things. Now, here is a long quote from NFHS 5 report about the multi-stage sampling that they have used. You can read it from there. The report is available on net. What I want to say that what NFHS has done, that they have selected states first. All the states have been selected. Then within those states, there are districts. Then within the districts, there are rural areas and urban areas. Within rural area, there are villages. Urban area, there are census enumeration wards. So from district level, they go to urban and rural, and then in urban areas, census enumeration wards, rural areas, selection of some villages. And villages have been selected by using two additional criteria. One, probability proportional to size method, and then stratifying population according to percentage of SC/ST. Like this is a quote from the report. In every selected rural and urban primary census unit, a complete household mapping and listing operation was conducted prior to the main survey. Selected primary sampling units with an estimated number of at least 300 households were segmented into segments of approximately 100 to 150 households. Two of the segments were randomly selected for the survey using systematic sampling with probability proportional to segment size. Therefore, an NFHS 5 cluster is either a primary census unit or a segment of primary census unit. In the second stage, in every selected rural and urban cluster, 22 households were randomly selected with systematic sampling, a detailed description of sampling design, weight computation, estimation of standard errors, and strategies to enhance data quality measures is presented in volume 2 of the national report. In urban areas also, census enumeration wards, and then selection of some census enumeration wards on the basis of proportion of SC/ST population. And wards were selected then by using probability proportional to size and systematic sampling. This shows that multi-stage is not so simple that you start with say state, then go to district, then go to sub-districts or primary health center and things like that. This multi-stage can be a complex design if you are using different types of sampling techniques at different stages, and you are free to do that. In LASI, again, LASI, it was a 3-stage sampling. Urban areas, rural areas, sub-districts, and finally, one census enumeration block was randomly selected in each in urban area. In the 4th stage, households were selected. So urban, rural, sub-districts, primary census units or census enumeration ward, uh, which is called primary sample. The first stage of units are called primary sampling units. You can read all this from the detailed reports of NFHS or LASI. The idea is that there are stages. The stage may be state, then district, then urban and rural areas, then in urban areas, census enumeration wards, in rural areas, uh, villages, and at each stage, you make a careful selection of subunits. So some census enumeration wards are selected, some villages are selected. And you can also use other techniques like stratification in selection of villages and then households. So lastly, use if uh, a three-stage sampling design and the final ultimate sampling units were selected by dividing uh, our units into stages. Election studies can also use, or they actually often use multi-stage sampling. For example, you want to know um, the mood of the people, that in the next parliamentary election, whom they are going to vote. You can choose one or two states. It depends on funds. It depends on the choice of the donors. Suppose you choose UP as a state. Then, or you can choose a number of states. If you have more funds and if you have more time and more staff, you can conduct this study in a number of states. Then out of all the states of India, some would be selected either by using simple random sampling or a purposive sampling design. You may like to know uh, what is the trend in south, what is the trend in north. So you divide all the states into southern region, northern region like that, and select some from each. Then within each state, you go down to the second stage sampling units would be the parliamentary constituencies. And within the parliamentary constituencies, you select some assembly constituencies. It's not necessary that you use the same method of selection everywhere. You can use a purposive sampling to select some states. You can use simple random sampling method to select parliamentary constituencies. And you can select some other method, say method of stratification for selection of assembly units. Then come to municipal and rural wards. Then you go to polling booths and then to voters list in each polling booth. In selected polling booth, you obtain the voters list. And from the voters list, you select some on the basis of uh, simple random sample, or you can stratify them according to age or some other criteria. If some characteristics of people are known or they are available on the voters list, you can use the technique of stratification also and then select some. Or you can use systematic sampling design at the level of voters. So you see, state, parliamentary constituency, assembly, municipal, urban, rural, polling booth, voters list. These are the stages through which you have made your decision to select the final, ultimate sampling units are the voters. So your states are the primary sampling units and your voters are the ultimate sampling units. And in between there are stages, and this multi-stage can be combined as in NFHS or LASI with the idea of uh, cluster with the idea of probability proportional to size, with the idea of stratified sample. Now, what should be the sample size in these kinds of studies? It depends on at what stage does the survey aim at reliable estimates. For example, in the first round, NFHS wanted reliable estimates at the national level. So sample size was small, not as big as it is today. Then gradually, we moved to a situation in which we were looking for reliable estimates at the state level. So our sample size was larger. Now we want reliable estimates at the district level. So our sample is still larger. It runs into lakhs because we want a minimum size of district sample so that reliable estimates with a narrow confidence interval can be obtained at the district level. Tomorrow, if Government of India or Ministry of Health asks IIPS to provide reliable estimates at the block level, then the sample size will be much bigger. Or the ministry sometime may want to have reliable estimates for slums or certain cities or certain vulnerable populations or estimates of certain phenomena, events, or say vulnerability of certain types of groups or uh, stigmatized, something about stigmatized group, our sample size would become larger. So it depends on the purpose, it depends on how much money, how much of other resources are available, and whether you are in a position to control the non-sampling errors in large-scale survey. So now, what are the advantages of multi-stage sampling? It's an alternative to sample design when the sampling frame of ultimate sample units is not available. In NFHS or in LASI or other similar surveys, consumption surveys, NHS surveys, the ultimate sampling unit is a person, but you do not have a complete list of all the persons whom you want to sample for the entire nation. So you begin with states, then go to districts and go to lower levels, and ultimately to ultimate sampling units, which may be households, which may be some respondents in different households. The respondents may be one or two or three, and it can be combined with cluster sampling, simple random, stratified. It's a flexible design. So you may use as many stages as possible. And you can try independent sample methods at different stages. And therefore, one of the advantages, major advantages of multi-stage sampling, apart from the fact that it only can be employed if the ultimate sampling units are not listed or there is large heterogeneity in the data. For cost reduction and efficiency. And methods are evolved for controlling the effect of variation in sizes of sampling units on sampling errors. Now, like any other technique, it also has some limitations. The choice of best sampling method at any stage is subjective. So whether, like I said that in election study, whether you choose one state or several states, on what basis? It may be on the basis of simple random sampling, or it may be according to some criterion, like you may like to have some South Indian states, some North Indian states, or you may be more interested in Northeastern states, or you may be interested in poor states or rich, relatively those states with relatively higher per capita income, or industrialized states, agricultural states. So accordingly, you choose your sampling method. Uh, so the choice of best sampling method is subjective. It's not given by any formula or any. It is not a textbookish matter, or it's not a matter to be resolved by uh, any scientific or objective means. Multi-stage sampling yields a larger variance, sampling error than simple random sampling. And some of you who have used cluster sampling in the past know that in cluster sampling, to achieve the same level of standard error, you must have a, uh, a sample which is larger. Generally, the ratio of variance of cluster to simple random is considered to be uh, between 1.5 to 2, which means that if you are going for cluster sampling, you need a sample of size which is 1.5 to 2 times the sample size that you need for a simple random sample. Another major limitation of this technique is that since a large section of population is not selected, means within a state you have selected some districts, that means that other districts are not selected. So there is a selection bias, which may also be called researcher's bias, because researcher himself or herself may decide which states or which subunits to select. And under coverage bias. So there are two types of biases: selection bias and under coverage bias, which affect your results. Also, uh, this multi-stage sampling suffers from the problem of alternative building blocks of primary sampling units and other subunits, which means that there is not one fixed rule uh, according to which your primary sampling units must be divided into clusters and subclusters. A state can be divided into certain regions: cultural regions, geographical regions, administrative regions, or maybe simply districts, administrative districts. So, like that, when it comes to villages within a block, you can select them on the basis of size. You can select them on the basis of remoteness of the village. That's, you want to select some villages which are close to cities, some villages which are remote or which are far off from the district headquarters. So these are some limitations. Now there are some things which we have to keep in mind to improve estimation, means to produce estimates with lower sampling error or narrower confidence interval. One is stratification, as NFHS has used stratification. National Sample Survey also uses stratification at the lower level. So literacy and percentage of scheduled castes are often the criteria on the basis of which villages are stratified. And you can use probability proportional to size at any stage if the subunits from which subunits are selected vary in size. Means, you know that if the clusters vary in size, then you are not assigning equal probabilities of selection to all the possible respondents. But you can achieve that goal if you use probability proportional to size method and attach higher probability of selection to those clusters or those subunits which are larger in size, and lower probability of selection to those clusters or those subunits which are of smaller size. You can also use self-weighting scheme that NFHS does, and it takes care of representativeness of the sample, that our sample is representative of the entire gamut of states, districts, and socioeconomic variations uh, that salvating scheme can be used. There are computer packages available for estimation of means, proportions, standard errors, relative errors, and confidence intervals. In large-scale surveys with sample size of uh, 6 lakh, 7 lakh, and maybe tomorrow sample size will be much higher if we want estimates at the block level. It's not possible to go for manual calculations or even for advanced Excel sheet. Use computer packages, and luckily these computer packages are available for estimation of means, etc. So at the end of the report, these means, proportions, standard errors, relative errors, and confidence intervals that you get are actually computed on the basis of um, some computer packages. These packages are to be used in large-scale survey. So, friends, the main slide of this presentation is this. The 10 things you need to report. It's not enough to say that you are using multi-stage sampling. You must also say 10 things. One, sampling traditions in the field in which you are making your study. That in the field of your study, in the past, what kind of sampling methods were used? And why are you using multi-stage sampling? So rationale for using multi-stage sampling. If in the past some other methods were used and you are using multi-stage sampling, then you must justify why multi-stage sampling. Then expected outcome. At what stage do you want reliable estimates? At the level of state, district, taluka, separate cities, maybe some metropolitan cities, maybe slums, or maybe some other subunits of population. Nature of heterogeneity of primary sample units. Some statement about nature of heterogeneity of primary sample units. Heterogeneity at second and higher stages. Actually, it is the heterogeneity thing which suggests you to use cluster sampling or stratified sampling. If there is no heterogeneity, then any sampling technique is okay. Method of selection of subunits at different states. At different states or at different stages, what method of selection was used? Purposive, random, if random, then what? Systematic or stratified or simple random or probability proportional to size, you have to mention. Then method of selection of ultimate sampling units. Stratification or what? If stratified, on what basis? It may include the criterion of literacy. It may include percent SCST. In some special surveys, it may include, say, percent of migrants or percent labor force engaged in agriculture. It depends on for what purpose you are making the study. And if probability proportional to size was used to select ultimate sampling units, that also you have to mention. Then size of ultimate sampling units from different strata. Not only you talk about the sample size, total sample size, you also mention about size of ultimate sampling units from different strata. And if you are using this, mention whether you are using a self-weighting scheme. It's not necessary. Not all the researchers use self-weighting. Some researchers may go for estimation for stratified sampling later on. But if you are using self-weighting or any specialized technique, that also you have to mention. So let me repeat what I wanted to say, that it is not enough to write that you are using multi-stage sampling. You have to mention all these 10 things. Then your discussion of your sampling methodology is completed. These are two references from where you can get more detail. I think it will be a good idea if you read uh, the portions on methodologies that NFHS in your country, in our country, in India, NFHS, National Sample Survey, uh, or Human Development Survey, or LASI, or there are state level health surveys, annual health surveys. There are very good election studies by certain centers. So what exactly, what before you apply multi-stage sampling, see what these researchers or research centers uh, have done to apply multi-stage sampling with a care. Thank you. Uh, this is all that I wanted to say. I hope that my discussion of multi-stage sampling is useful to you. I will be looking for your comments on this presentation. Thank you.